This presentation is about visual schedules. As you can see, you have a variety of visual schedules on the screen in front of you. When we think about a visual schedule, we think about its purpose. The purpose is for the student to be independent. So when you set up a visual schedule, you need to be thinking about what your student is going to see and what they are able to follow independently. So as you can see from the different examples on your page, that there are open-ended ones where the schedule might change from day to day, hour to hour, and then there are also closed ones where the schedule is very routine and it is the same every day. That also can be said for what you use as your independent pieces within a schedule. So you can use words, you can use pictures, you can use exact photographs of the exact materials that a student is going to use. You can use a combination of any of those things. Again, you need to think about what the task entails and what the student is able to do with those materials independently. If the student is a reader, use words. If a student needs to have exact photographs of the exact materials, then use those. All right, it's all student-based. Another benefit of the visual schedule is that it's permanent. It's static, it's not dynamic. So once you present it to a student, it stays there. It doesn't disappear. If you compare it to a verbal prompt, as soon as you give that verbal prompt is gone. It's no longer there to continually be a reference for a student. Whereas a visual schedule, it constantly is in front of them for them to reference as they continue throughout their task. We all use visual schedules. If you think about your own personal life, we probably use calendars as a visual schedule for ourselves. You have a personal calendar, you may have a calendar for work, but again, you set it up so that you can be independent. You put as much detail into that calendar as you need to make sure that you get your tasks done. You know all the details that need to go into that task, and you are distributing that task to whoever needs to be receive that task, right? So let's say you have a lot of shorthand developed for yourself on your calendar. You know what it means. It still makes you independent, right? So again, it needs to be individualized. If you need a task spelled out for you to make sure that you remember all the details, because maybe you only do that task one time a year, then maybe that's the amount of detail you put into that component of the visual schedule. Or if it's something that you do on a regular basis, but you need others to see that that is what's next on your calendar, then you just do shorthand, right? So again, visual schedules need to be dependent upon what a student can do independently and be tailored to their level. So whether it's words, whether it's pictures, whether it's photographs, whether the schedule details the entire day, or maybe 30 minutes of work time versus one task, right? You can have as much detail in there as you want. So when we think about an overall schedule for the day, that might just be for a student who needs to be able to make independent transitions, right? So once they get to a certain area, they tend to be on task. They have some good academic skills, but they have difficulty with transitions. So your visual schedule might only be serving those transition times. Where do I need to go? When do I need to go there? And what do I need to bring with me? And that way, when they have that visual schedule, all staff are able to support that student in the exact same way, because that visual schedule already outlines all the necessary components for the student. And we don't rely on different verbal prompts from different staff. Everybody is consistent. Another student might need a visual schedule for a specific task, right? Sometimes we call these task analysis, but you can make it visual. So you're breaking down a task to all the small little components a student needs to complete in order to be successful and independent. But it might be very minute details. All right, so let's think about the task of packing up at the end of the day. Your first task might be identify your folder to go home. Go to the place that you get your folder. Take your folder to your cubby. Get all your papers out of your cubby and put them in your folder. Put your folder in your backpack. Return to seat, right? So all of those steps would be in there, But instead of having a para or a staff member having to prompt them through that process every single day, and the student not being able to make this transition independently, um, we want to transfer it over to there is a permanent visual schedule built for that student, and they use that as their accommodation to be able to make this transition independently. And that would free up a para to help support other areas in the classroom, right? So again, we constantly want to think about how we can remove the verbal prompting and instead put in a visual system for the student to be independent. You tailor it to their independent ability of understanding an icon or a word or a photograph, and you break it down to the level of steps that the student needs in order to do that task independently. If you have ever attended a structured teaching workshop put on by our consultants, you would see that you can often put schedules within schedules, right? So you might have a schedule for the overall day, and then within that schedule, there might be an icon or a word that indicates that there's 30 minutes of independent work time. So you go to that area during that time, and then once you're in that area, you might have separate individualized visual schedules for different tasks within that, maybe a sorting task or a short academic task. And then once you're done with those smaller visual schedules, you then go back to the overall schedule and reference and what's next, right? So there are many different purposes or uses for a visual schedule. But again, the bottom line is tailor it to that student's level of understanding, their ability to comprehend. Break it down to the components of the task that student needs, and make it visual. Right? We want to eliminate all of the verbal prompts. And that is a visual schedule in a nutshell.